the madman's dinner. I knew something was wrong as soon as I came out of hypersleep, because the pain was far greater than it should have been. I could hardly move my joints for a good hour after I woke up, so I forced myself to lie there, trying to clear my head. The sleep chamber computer, with its glowing heads-up display, said I'd been asleep for 20 years, 3 months, 14 days, and 6 hours. That wasn't right. The trip was only supposed to take 5 years. As I finally gathered enough strength to sit up, I cursed myself for hooking the hypersleep chambers up to the station's computer. It seemed there had been a malfunction, and my chamber hadn't woken me on time. Although it was dark in the small container, I could see my brother's hypersleep chamber thanks to the glow from the displays. His chamber was open just like mine, and I could see him inside, although his eyes were still closed. Grunting and huffing, I pulled the IVs out of my arms and legs, and then got out of the chamber and knelt beside Lucius. A few minutes later, Lucius opened his eyes. My little brother smiled at me, but he wasn't much for talking. Never had been. "You okay?" Lucius nodded in his simple, contented way, looking at me with his wide blue eyes. I helped him out of the chamber, and then got us uniforms out of a box in the corner. I also got us a couple of tubes of meal paste. I knew we would be very hungry once the hypersleep drugs wore off. Once we were dressed, we went to the door of the small chamber I'd paid a fortune to be snuck aboard the station. The luxury space station was invite-only, filled with billionaires and their families, so people like me and Lucius weren't welcome unless we were part of the staff hired to keep the place running for generations. But even those jobs went to upper-middle-class people, which Lucius and I were definitely not. I had landed a job preparing the station's hypersleep chambers for the journey, but that job ended before the Salvation took off from Earth orbit. Still, I knew that getting aboard the station was the best chance of our continued survival. Earth was falling into chaos, and crushing poverty was the norm for 99% of the population. So I used every last cent of my savings and risked prison time to get us on board with our own hypersleep chambers hidden away in this container in the cargo hold. Now, it seemed that almost everything had gone according to plan, except for oversleeping by about 15 years. We moved out of the container, left the cargo area, and stepped into a spotless white hallway. We padded down the hall and found the nearest hypersleep chamber wing. There were 6,000 people on the station, not counting about 500 staff members, and there were 6 different hypersleep wings on the massive station, each with 1,000 chambers. The employees had 2 different hypersleep wings, each with 250 chambers. As we stepped into the massive hypersleep wing, I noticed that all the chambers I could see were empty. So apparently the malfunction was limited to our hypersleep pods. Excited to get things rolling, I pulled out my handheld and checked to make sure my back door into the station's computer was still there. I verified that our forged identities were in place, and then turned to Lucius. "You ready to see our new home?" Lucius smiled. "Yes." 2 hours later, a sick feeling had taken root in my stomach. Lucius and I had explored one entire wing of the station, not seeing another soul. I started to worry that I hadn't actually come out of hypersleep and was in a coma. All sorts of things can go wrong in hypersleep, especially if you're taken out without the proper sequence of drugs. Lucius kept asking me where all the people were in his simple, childlike way. I told him I didn't know. We entered a park section of the adjacent wing. The artificial sun shone down on lush grass and trees. The sound of a waterfall in the distance came to our ears, along with the chirps of birds who had apparently been living in the trees for generations. My senses were still coming to life after hibernating for so long, so when I caught a whiff of rot on the light artificial breeze, I nearly threw up the meal paste I had eaten earlier. Lucius grabbed his nose and made a face. We kept walking along the stone path until a strange mound came into view. At first, I thought it was a large rock or a pile of sand. But as its component parts made themselves clear to my confused mind, I realized with mounting terror that it was a pile of dead bodies. Lucius, having realized what it was, turned away, hunched his shoulders, and closed his eyes. I barely noticed. I was too busy staring at the mound of rotting human bodies piled on top of each other. There were dozens of bodies, men, women, and children. All of them wore the same simple white underwear for use in hypersleep chambers. My legs moved me hesitantly toward the bodies, each step closer dashing my dwindling hope that I was seeing this wrong. So many questions ran through my brain as I crept closer, but all those thoughts were cut off by the sound of a man singing. Suddenly, an electric buggy, driven by a bearded man, crested the grassy hill just beyond the bodies. The sight of all those bodies had me on edge, so my first instinct was to rush out of the open, throwing myself down behind some bushes nearby. The man sang a bubbly song with words I couldn't understand as he drove the buggy. They weren't of any language I recognized, and had a feeling that they were the gibberish ramblings of a madman. Because he did look like a madman. He had a gray-black beard that reached the belly button on his shirtless abdomen, but the very middle of the beard, from the base of his chin up to under his nose, was clean-shaven. His head was the opposite, a bushy throng of hair right down the middle of his scalp, like an unkempt mohawk, while the sides were shaved to the skin. Suddenly, I remembered Lucius. I looked back and saw him still standing there, his back to the bodies and his shoulders hunched. The madman parked the buggy next to the pile of bodies and said,
"Hello, friends."
He followed this by a ludicrous cackle that caused some of the birds to chirp and flitter between branches in agitation.
"What do we have here today?"
he asked the pile, reaching in and pulling a woman's corpse down from the outside.
Woo! We're going a little ripe, aren't we, friends? Looks like I got too many out at once.
As the man cackled again, I began to ease my way back toward Lucius, praying the madman wouldn't notice him. I hadn't gone 5 steps before the man called out.
Well, what do we have here?
I froze, thinking he had seen me. But of course, it was worse. I heard the hum of his electric motor as he drove past my hiding place and stopped just behind Lucius.
Where the hell did you come from?
He asked, hopping out of the cart. When Lucius didn't answer, the man stepped beside him and grabbed his arm. Lucius didn't like being touched when he was upset, and he cried out, jerking his arm away. The madman moved with incredible speed, popping Lucius in the jaw, causing my brother to collapse to the ground. I lurched out of the trees and sprinted toward the man, praying my muscles had finally shook off the effects of hypersleep, knowing they really hadn't. The man laughed harshly when he saw me coming. I closed on him, rage blocking all logic out, and swung. He easily ducked my punch and cracked me 2 good ones in the ribs. Gasping, I stumbled back. He moved in and whipped a leg up, kicking me in the side of the head. I crashed down to the ground, momentarily dazed, but aware enough to see the madman grabbing something out of his buggy. He came up to me with the handheld medical device, an auto-injector, and shot me full of something. I only realized moments later that it was a paralytic agent, because I remained conscious, able to move my eyes, but the rest of my body was useless. The madman did the same to my brother, then resumed his insane singing as he loaded us up into the buggy. Once he had us strapped in, me in the front and Lucius in the back, he took off back the way he'd come.
Everyone's going to be so excited,
he said.
We'll have a grand old time tonight. Grand old time. And of course, you'll have to die. So sorry about that, but it's the truth. I can't stand company for too long, but you and your friend will at least get to have some fun first. Wouldn't you like that?
Even if I could have answered him, I wouldn't have. My reeling mind was too fixated on the gruesome sights we passed. As we left the park area and came into a shopping center with restaurants and shops on either side, I saw more dead bodies. Some of them were strung up from the apartment balconies that overlooked the thoroughfare. Others were seated at cafe tables with their heads or arms or legs chopped off. Many of them were rotting, but others were fairly fresh. Wide streaks of dried blood zigzagged across the walkway. as though someone had dragged ruptured bodies to and from. We drove past tennis courts that were piled high with body parts. A basketball hoop had a couple of severed heads caught in the net. As we came upon a bench on which a bloody but alive man was tied, the madman stopped the buggy, leapt out, and choked the gagged man to death. When he got back in and we resumed our hellish journey, he glanced over at me and said,
Tom, what an asshole. Glad to be rid of him.
Then he grinned. We drove on, passing countless more bodies. The pervasive stench of death grew stronger. I wondered if this man and the group he spoke of had been at this for 15 years. Since I had worked on the ship, I knew that it had cleaning robots that, when activated, could dispose of whatever mess the humans had made. I began to wonder how many cycles they had been through, how many people they had pulled out of hypersleep for their sick desires. Finally, we came to a luxurious dining room with chapel ceilings, chandeliers, and lavish furniture. We stopped at the top of a ramp that overlooked the entire dining room. There were dozens of tables, and all but one were occupied by people dressed in suits and sparkling dresses. The one unoccupied table sat in the middle of the room.
We're here,
The madman called out.
and we have 2 guests of honor this evening. Let's eat.
I expected something to happen, but there was no response. None of the people even moved. Only when we drove down the ramp and headed toward the empty table did I realize that everyone in the dining room was dead. However, these bodies were slightly fresher than most of the ones we'd passed on the way here. Seeing this, I concluded the madman was acting alone. He had somehow sabotaged the ship, causing people to sleep indefinitely until he was ready for them. I still didn't know how we had awoken when we had. Maybe it was a malfunction. Not that it mattered now. The stench in the dining room wasn't so bad. In fact, there was the tantalizing smell of cooking meat coming from somewhere. The madman stopped by the empty table, which was only set for 2. He rushed over to an adjacent table, tossed the corpse out of a chair, and dragged the seat back to the empty table. He then unstrapped us and got us into 2 of the 3 seats. I was amazed at how easily he maneuvered our limp bodies. Then again, if he had been at this for 15 years, he would have moved hundreds or thousands of limp bodies. Once he got us situated, he disappeared on foot. I looked over at Lucius, who was conscious once again, his fear-filled eyes fixed on mine. Giving it my all, I tried to move my right hand. The fingers twitched, but it was exhausting. Still, I kept trying until the madman came back with a plate of steaming meat. He put the platter down in the middle of the table, allowing me to see that it was a cooked human leg from the knee down. After carving a few pieces off and setting them on all 3 of our plates, he produced an ancient pistol, one that fired actual bullets. It was surely a collector's item, and one that was probably worth more than I could earn in a lifetime. Rich people loved their guns, and it suited the madman in some strange way. He sat down, pointed the gun at Lucius, and said,
Won't be long now. Try anything funny and you'll be dead. But if we have a nice, pleasant meal together, we'll see.
A few minutes passed, and then the paralytic agent seemed to disappear, allowing Lucius and I to move once again. The madman grinned at us.
You know that old saying, eat the rich?
Without waiting for an answer, he fell into a cackling fit. I looked at Lucius, and I knew he wouldn't eat any of that meat. I looked at the steak knife next to my plate. The madman's cackling stopped at once, and he shook his head at me.
Bullets are faster than you. I need to cut it up for him,
I said.
Otherwise, he won't eat. Okie dokie, but no funny stuff. No.
Lucius protested as I stood up with the steak knife in my hand. With the table in the way, I knew I wouldn't be fast enough to stop the madman before he fired. So there was only one option, one chance to keep us alive for a little longer. I cut a small hunk of meat off of Lucius's serving and placed it in my mouth to demonstrate.
See? It's okay.
I wanted to vomit, but I held it down as I chewed and swallowed. Lucius looked as if I had just slapped him.
No!
he cried.
It's okay. Eat.
I cut another small portion off and brought it up to Lucius's mouth. He crossed his arms and turned his head away. I glanced at the madman and saw that all mirth had left his face. He placed his finger on the trigger, pointing the gun at Lucius.
Come on, just eat it,
I said, putting the knife down so I could use both hands. I jammed my fingers into Lucius's mouth and pried his teeth open even as he squirmed. Then I shoved the meat into his mouth and used both hands to work his jaw. I didn't see him grab the knife, but I felt it punch into my abdomen, sliding between my ribs. The sharp pain froze me for a moment. Then I straightened, stepping back, seeing the knife in my brother's hand slide out of me. I was barely aware of the madman's cackling. I looked into Lucius's face, but he was beyond seeing me at that moment. He brought the knife up and jammed the blade into the side of his throat. The madman cackled louder as blood spewed from Lucius's wound. I fell back into my chair, wheezing, suffocating as blood filled my lungs.
Best dinner yet!
The madman cackled and clapped his hands, the gun now abandoned on the table. I looked at my brother, whose expression was fixed on me. And in the moments before my death, I realized he was right to do what he did. He was willing to die rather than play a madman's sick game. But I was too desperate to live, too afraid to die. Lucius knew in his heart what I should have done too. Some things are worse than death. Story 2, Alcatraz Station.
They're leaving!
Lonnie cries, looking out the porthole window.
They're all leaving us here! Let me see,
I say, bringing the radio down from my mouth. I crowd next to the nurse and peer out, seeing lifeboats shooting off into space from the other side of the prison. The prison station is shaped like a giant capital H, with minimum security on one side, our side, and maximum security on the crossbar. The other side of the H is all admin and living quarters for the staff. It's also where all the staff lifeboats are.
See?
She says, on the verge of tears.
They're leaving us here to die. I'm sure they're not all leaving,
I say, but the way my legs shake and my fingers go numb tells me that maybe they are. Maybe that's why I can't get anyone on the radio. Still staring out the window across the station, watching more and more lifeboats jettison, I bring the radio to my mouth again.
Hello, is anyone there? This is Austin, one of the nurses that arrived today. I'm in the medium security wing with another nurse. Is anyone there?
Lonnie shifts her hazel eyes from the window to me as we wait for a reply. None comes.
Shit! We need to get over there and get on a boat,
I say.
No way! There's a riot happening in the maximum security wing. We need to wait until they send help and get things back under control. They've deserted the station, Lonnie. Remember how long it took us to get here? There won't be any help coming for at least 48 hours. By then,
I trail off, hoping I don't have to spell it out for her. But if all the guards have fled, then it's only a matter of time before the entire prison is controlled by the inmates. And this employee break room in a secured hallway isn't going to keep them out for long. Lonnie trembles.
Do you know what they'll do to me if they catch me?
Her fear-stretched eyes swim with horrible visions of her possible future.
I know, but if we sit here and wait, there's a virtual guarantee that they'll find us. But I've worked prison jobs before. I was in the middle of a riot once. Our only chance is to move fast and get off this station before they organize and take over. Right now, we can use the chaos to our advantage. What about the virus?
She asks meekly. The virus. It's the whole reason we're even here. A strange sickness that swept through about a quarter of the prison, overloading their on-site medical staff. So they requested a couple of additional bodies to help. Now, here we are. And, of course, a nasty riot erupts just a couple of hours after we arrive. But riots don't generally cause the entire staff to evacuate. I try not to think about all the crazy things we heard over the radio before it went silent. Impossible things. No, best not to think about that. It's enough to drive you crazy. I consider her question,
What about the virus?
for a long moment before answering.
We're both up to date on all our shots. So long as we wear our masks, I think we'll be okay.
But we need to get out of these scrubs and into some prison whites. I think we passed a laundry facility on the way up here. You ready? Lonnie doesn't look ready, but she nods. I take her hand and we head out of the break room. 10 minutes later, we're both wearing prison whites and surgical masks. I even found a do-rag for Lonnie to wear. It's not much, but maybe it will keep these male prisoners from noticing she's a woman at a glance. Since we're on a staff floor and several levels up from the H crossbar, which leads us to the admin side of the station, we have to travel down 3 levels before we can go across to safety. There are elevators, but we decide to take the stairs. I don't know about Lonnie, but visions of elevator doors opening to reveal a floor full of bloodthirsty criminals is enough to make me want to avoid any elevators. As we get to the floor we want, the unmistakable sound of a commotion comes through the stairwell door. Men shouting and screaming, footsteps pounding the composite metal floors. With our backs against the stairwell wall, I ease forward and peer through the mesh-reinforced window into the hallway. I see a guard I recognize. His name is Palomo, and he's the one who escorted us from the med bay where we were working to the break room once the riot started getting out of hand. He left us in the break room, telling us to stay put and wait for someone to come get us. Seeing him through the window gives me a little hope, but it's quickly dashed as I realize what's happening. Palomo limp runs down the hallway, followed closely by hooting prisoners, free from their cells. About a quarter of them wear surgical masks, given to them by the medical staff in an effort to slow the spread of the mysterious virus. One of them has a collapsible baton, surely taken from Palomo himself, and the others carry prison shanks of various shapes, sizes, and makes. Palomo makes for the stairwell door, causing a jolt of panic as I realize he's about to give our position away. But before he makes it to the door, the prisoner with the baton smacks him in the back of the head. The guard falls to the floor, and the crazed prisoners descend on him, bashing and kicking and stabbing. They keep at it until well after I'm sure Palomo is dead. For a moment, I'm sure some of the prisoners are going to come through the door, but something happens deeper in the hallway, drawing their attention. There are shouts of alarm as men call out to each other. Fear sweeps through the prisoners, most of whom are now splashed in Palomo's blood. As one, they turn and run down the hall, heading away from where Lonnie and I need to go. I keep watching, hoping to see a throng of well-armed guards pushing the prisoners back. But what I see coming down the hall after the prisoners causes my knees to go weak and my stomach to contract. The group lurching after the prisoners are all wearing prison whites, but they hardly resemble humans any longer. Their skin is covered in black and maroon lesions and puke-yellow growths the size of eyeballs. It looks as though something has gnawed away at the skin around their lips, nostrils, and eyes. The eyelids on all the ones who run past are gone, revealing bulging, bloodshot eyes with pupils that have all but taken over the irises. Their nostrils have melted away, and their lips are gone, revealing blackening teeth that clack together as if they're hungry for flesh. As the last of them pass, I think about how patients infected with the mystery virus were all suffering from inflamed areas around the mouth, eyes, and nostrils. It can't be a coincidence. The things we heard over the radio about prisoners transforming is true. As I turn to make sure Lonnie hasn't seen what I have, I find her standing right behind me, peering over my shoulder. Tears stream down her cheeks, and she shakes her head in stubborn refusal.
No.
We have to go, I say, gripping her wrist. We have to run. She's still shaking her head and saying no when I open the door and pull her out into the hallway. As I step over Palomo's body, I notice his keycard attached by a clip to his shirt pocket. Not sure if we'll need it or not, I stoop and yank it off before dragging Lonnie down the hallway. We pass through a sally port, kind of an airlock with 2 gates that should never both be opened at the same time to prevent prisoners from going where they shouldn't. But both gates are open, which speaks to how bad things have gotten. After the sally port, we step into the main cell block of the prison, a long, straight section which is the crossbar of the H. The floor ahead of us, lined on both sides with open cells, is a mess of detritus and bodies. Bludgeoned or stabbed guards and prisoners litter the floor here and there. A couple of them are still alive, but just barely. Other than the dead and injured, I see no one between us and the other sally port, far on the other side. But there's a strange sound coming from the balconies above. It's a chorus of grunts and growls and low metallic bangs. This section of the prison is 5 stories tall. The bottom floor, where we are, is overlooked by 4 stories of facing cells and their accompanying walkways. But we're still under a section of the 2nd floor walkway, so we can't see what's causing the chorus of odd sounds. But as we step out from under the walkway, we look up. The walkways above are walled off with metal mesh to prevent inmates from jumping or throwing each other off. But those mesh barriers are bulging as throngs of infected prisoners try to force their way through. They must be locked on their respective floors, trying to get free. Either that, or they've lost all ability to reason, driven only by base instincts to spread their infections to as many people as possible. They stare at us with their bloodshot, lidless eyes. Their lipless mouths reveal quickly rotting teeth, parted in grim anticipation. Pustules pop and leak foul yellow-green goo as they press up against each other. Pausing to gape at this stunning sight, I see something that will stay with me until I die, which may not be long. One of the infected prisoners has his face pressed up against the mesh, and he's being pushed from behind by dozens of other prisoners. The pressure is so great that the skin of the man's degrading nose and cheeks is being cut into by the mesh. Blood pours down the metal and drips to the floor. The sound of stressed metal giving way fills the corridor in a shriek, and a section of mesh fencing 2 stories up gives way, allowing a wave of infected to pour through.
Run!
I scream, even as I'm moving on shaky legs. Lonnie, who seems to have reverted to a childlike state as a kind of self-defense mechanism, doesn't need to be told twice. She runs right along with me. But the problem is we have no choice but to pass the wave of infected now hitting the floor with sickening crunches and thuds. Dozens of bodies crash to the floor, their limbs snapping, skulls rupturing. But as we're finally coming abreast of them, the first bodies have made a cushion for the ones following. Several infected men roll off the growing pile and dart after us. Legs pistoning, arms pumping, eyes wide, I run and dare not look back. I keep my eyes fixed on the sally port door, which is open. The next door in the sequence is closed, but that doesn't matter. As long as we can get inside and close that first door, we've got a chance. We near it. Slapping footsteps behind us get closer and closer, but we're almost there. I jump over a dead prisoner on the floor, slipping in his blood, but managing to keep to my feet. Just a few more yards. A large prisoner suddenly appears ahead, between us and the door. His lidless eyes look like they belong on some unblinking deep-sea creature, not a human being. He has blood all over his mouth and chest, and the skin of his shirtless upper body looks like a desert city after a bombing campaign. I'm still holding Lonnie's arm, and I can feel her tense when she sees him. The infected man stands right in our path, blocking the door as he clacks his teeth together in a skeleton grin. Knowing what I have to do, I let go of Lonnie's arm and reach into my pocket to grab the guard's badge. My plan is to give it to Lonnie and then take on the big bastard so she can get past him to safety. Otherwise, we're both dead. But as I'm about to pull the badge out of my pocket, Lonnie dodges over to me and kicks at my right leg. I lose my footing, yanking my hand out of the pocket and, on reflex, reaching out to Lonnie as I stumble. I grab her arm, trying to stay up, but I can't. I fall to the hard floor, taking Lonnie down with me. Rolling to a stop, I have enough time to make 2 sudden realizations. The first is that Lonnie tried to sacrifice me to save herself. The second is that there's a dead prison guard right nearby, and he still holds a collapsible baton in his hand. He must have been killed by the infected, because any other inmates would have taken the baton. Scrambling, I grab the baton and whip it up at the big bastard as he attacks me. Slightly behind me, I can hear Lonnie screaming as the infected who were chasing us rip into her. The big bastard, momentarily stunned by the blow, comes at me again. This time, I use the thing like a knife, jamming the bulbous tip of it into one of the guy's eyes. The eye pops out like a ripe grape coming off the vine, and the baton sinks deep into his skull. He goes limp and falls to the floor. I dart forward and get into the sally port, yanking the gate shut behind me just as several infected smash into it. Beyond them, Lonnie is still screaming. One infected prisoner rips the do-rag off her head and then yanks her scalp off. Unable to look anymore, I turn away and step to the other door. Panic grips me as I look at the keycard reader. I can't remember if I pulled the keycard out of my pocket or not. I jam my hand into the pocket and feel the thin piece of plastic. Sighing, I use the keycard to get through the door, shutting it behind me. Now, I have to hope there's still a lifeboat left. Story 3. The Silent Station.
Space zombies.
Ruggiero says around a mouthful of yogurt paste.
Space zombies?
Boykin asks, still chewing his breakfast.
How would that happen? Did they run into a hitchhiking zombie on their way to Proxima B and decide to pick it up for a ride?
Ruggiero shakes his head and flaps his arms, sending a wave of pungent body odor my way.
Nah, man. It's a research station, right? So they were working on some kind of space virus that got loose and turned them into space zombies. Easy.
Saldez, sitting across from me, rolls her large green eyes.
It's always something stupid, like a scrubber malfunction or a chemical leak. We're gonna find that ship full of dead people, but they won't be walking around drooling and saying brains.
Boykin elbows me.
What about you, Dieter? How do you think they died? I'm gonna go with space vampires. I hear they're really vicious this far from any sunlight.
That generates me a couple of chuckles, but the buzzing of the work alarm cuts the banter short. Groaning, everyone stands up, scarfing the rest of their meals down. For the next 3 hours, we prepare for contact with the Silent Space Station. Because it would cost too much to send a team of investigators out here, we've been sent to haul the station back to the nearest port so the official investigation can commence. We are, after all, a team of 4 lowly workers on a tug vessel. We specialize in hauling huge objects around, whether they be mineral-rich asteroids, chunks of ice, or seemingly deserted space stations. One thing's for sure, no matter what happened on that station, the solar government will want to repurpose it, or at the very least, scrap it out for parts. So, once all the preparations are done, and we've geared up and gone through all our checklists, I finally get to take a breather as I wait for us to dock. Peering out the docking bay window, I study the station. It's a series of tubes in the shape of a 3-rung ladder, with solar panels sprouting here and there. It's nothing compared to the dock stations orbiting Earth, Mars, and Saturn that are essentially floating cities, but it's still pretty big, boasting a dozen labs and almost 100 people living on it when it suddenly went silent. 97 souls, to be exact. Although no distress calls were transmitted, there must be something wrong on there. 97 people don't just go silent all at once, unless something seriously bad has happened. And we're the poor bastards who get to see what it was. That's another thing about being low-paid and highly replaceable workers. The powers that be don't mind if we die on the job. But we do get hazard pay for this job. So if we don't die, it'll be a nice payday. Most of my money will go directly back to the moon colony, where my mom and dad are trying to scrape together a living. A voice in my helmet snaps me out of my what-if reverie.
I'm not detecting any anomalies from the station.
Ruggiero says from his spot on the bridge.
The air is clean. Artificial gravity is nominal. No life signs detected. I'm going to open the airlock door. Dieter, wait for Saldez before you go wandering onto the station.
Copy, I say. A series of mechanical thumps and hums and hisses sound as the 2 compartments equalize. A moment later, both doors slide open, revealing a large compartment filled with dozens of naked and injured people, their dead eyes fixed on me. Gruesome injuries draw my shocked gaze. Missing limbs, stab wounds, torn out throats, scorched chest wounds, hanging eyeballs. Sucking in a shocked breath, I take a step back, my head filling with painful static. The movement seems to trigger the people, and they all rush forward, arms out, mouths open in silent screams. But as they rush toward me, they crowd together to get through the narrower airlock doorways. And as they touch each other, they morph together, becoming a bubbling mass of arms and skulls and legs and wounds. Backpedaling, I reach for the stun baton on my hip, scrambling to get it out of its holster in my panic. My back hits the door to the airlock compartment. The mass of flesh builds as it nears, and I know it will consume me when it touches me. Finally, I get the baton out and hit the button to extend it. Once it touches organic matter, it will emit a stunning bolt of electricity. I doubt it will work on the monster bearing down on me, but it's all I have. The doors behind me opens, and I fall backward. As soon as I hit the floor at Saldez's feet, the mass of dead humans disappears, and I'm lying on the floor with my baton out, pointing it at an empty space. Saldez looks down at me through her helmet visor, bulging green eyes prominent behind the partition.
What the hell, Dieter?
You didn't see it?
See what?
Virgillo, do you have eyes on the airlocks? I ask, getting to my feet, head still buzzing with static.
Yes.
You didn't see it either?
All I saw was you freaking out and pulling your baton.
Ruggiero answers over the radio.
What did you see?
Saldez asks. I open my mouth to answer her, but then I think better of it. If I start exhibiting signs of cognitive dysfunction or hallucinations, I'll be prevented from working this job, and I won't get paid my full wage. Nothing. It's fine. Let's go. I let Saldez walk ahead of me onto the space station, hanging back to see if anything will happen. Nothing does.
I should haul your ass back here for whatever the hell that was, Dieter.
Ruggiero says.
But I'm going to give you one more chance. Can you hold it together for a few more hours?
It's fine. I just thought we hadn't docked properly. That's all. It's fine. There's a slight pause before the team leader answers.
All right. Let's get this done.
I step over the threshold and onto the space station, but I keep my baton out as we go.
I don't like this shit at all.
Saldez says.
We're not equipped for something like this. Just calm down.
Ruggiero says over the radio.
Remember, the scan found no living beings on the ship. Whoever did this probably killed themselves. Great. Very comforting.
I'm too busy looking down at the severed hand lying amid a pool of dried blood in the hallway outside the infirmary. It's the first body part we've come across, but we've seen so much blood and little pieces of flesh and organs all over the place. There was a massacre on this space station. That much is clear. But we still haven't found the bodies. We've only seen pieces of them.
I'm sending Boykin to join you guys, okay?
Ruggiero says.
Why don't we just call it and tell the client that we searched the whole ship?
Saldez asks.
They want footage. I told you that at the beginning of this job. They want footage of the entire station. Why do I feel like we're canaries in the coal mine right now?
Saldez says, using an ancient idiom. I refrain from talking, preferring to use my energy to stay alert. The static that filled my head when the airlock doors opened has only grown more intense, and along with it has come a building pressure pressing against the inside of my skull. Saldez says something about getting this over with and trudges ahead. Soon, she disappears around a corner, leaving me alone in the hallway. I walk a few steps past the infirmary door and then fall to one knee. Ruggiero says my name over the radio, but it barely registers. The static blares. The radio chatter fades to the background as I get to my feet. Screw this, I mutter, determined to get back to our ship. If I don't get paid for this job, so be it. As I turn around, movement down the hallway catches my eye. A demon races toward me, its entire humanoid body peppered with lipless mouths. Its scorched skin is an uneven mess of pulsating pustules amid black and red flesh. The lipless, toothy mouths snap as it runs toward me. The mouths are everywhere, on its arms, its chest, its legs, where its genitals should be. Its two eyes are nothing but chomping mouths, same with its nose. I rush through the nearest door, which belongs to the infirmary, wasting precious seconds trying to lock the door. But of course I can't. I don't have the code. As the demon reaches the door, I lurch away, looking for a weapon. I pull open 2 drawers of supplies before I find a laser scalpel. I can feel the demon's footsteps drawing closer. I can hear the teeth clacking together over the rushing static in my head. Dropping my baton, I turn the scalpel on, generating a purple laser in the shape of a blade at the end. Then I spin around and stab the demon in the chest as it reaches for me. The demon staggers back, and I move with it, stabbing through its chest, through its mouths. The static in my head goes several decibels higher. The demon falls to the floor. I drop to my knees next to it and try to stab its face, but I keep hitting some invisible barrier. Movement from the infirmary door catches my attention. I look up to see another demon barreling toward me. Instead of mouths, this one has eyes all over its disgusting, scorched body. It has a single huge eye for a head, with a huge pupil that I know acts as a mouth. It will use that contracting pupil to eat pieces of me. It lurches toward me, and I jump up to meet it, jamming the scalpel into the eye, right at its crotch. I yank the scalpel up, opening its groin, and then its stomach, and finally its chest. As I pull the scalpel out and try to stab it into the thing's eye head, it grabs the scalpel and turns it back onto me. The blade goes through my suit easily and plunges into my left pec. Driven by panic and pain, I shove the demon's arm away. The scalpel slices through the side of my pec and then my left bicep on the way. During the struggle, the demon knocks the scalpel away and it goes rolling across the floor. I shove the demon off and scramble to my feet. I grab the scalpel and turn around, but the eye demon is now writhing on the floor, making strange noises that seem to echo in my head. The other demon lies still, dead. Someone is saying my name, screaming at me, but I can't make sense of the words over the static. Feeling blood run down my chest and arm, I know I have to get patched up. I remove my helmet and then my suit, stripping down to my underwear and getting into the infirmary's doc box. The box scans me and then gets to work. A couple of dexterous robot arms come down, clean the cuts, and then patch them up with quick-drying medical glue. While it works, I keep the scalpel in my right hand, looking out the doc box window at the two demons. They've both gone still now. The static roars in my head, and as the doc box finishes patching my cuts, I enter a command to diagnose my headache. As the thing scans me again, I grip my head in both hands and scream. A vision of a circle of pulsing fog enters my head. The doc box tells me it can find nothing wrong with me. I scream again and pass out. After blacking out for I don't know how long, I stumble out of the doc box and look at the two demons. Only they're not demons anymore. They're my two co-workers, Boykin and Saldez. I laugh nervously, thinking this is some sort of trick. I approach Saldez, looking at the way her body has been sliced open from her groin to her chest. It looks so real. I can even smell her ruptured insides. Saldez sits up and looks at me. Boykin does the same. As they get to their feet, I shift, backing toward the door, still in my underwear, scalpel still in my right hand. I get to the door. It opens automatically, and it's as if the hissing sound is like that of a starting cue for my two dead co-workers. They take off after me. I turn left initially, but there's a demon running toward me from that direction. One covered in dirt and maggots and insects that crawl in and out of its festering sores. Instead, I go right, running as fast as my legs can take me. My pursuers waste no time in coming after me. I take a right, looking over my shoulder to see the three of them gaining. Then I take another right, and the floor beneath my feet changes from lightweight metal to something that feels like loose skin. Looking down, I realize that's exactly what it is. Skin. Human skin. It's stretched all over the floor and walls and ceiling. Limbs and heads and other body parts jut out of it, all of them discolored and rotting. But straight ahead, about 10 feet away, in the middle of the hall, is a roughly circular hole created by all this flesh. What's on the other side of the hole, if anything, is obscured by a brilliant white fog that seems to undulate. The same fog I saw in my head before passing out in the doc box. I can't help but stare at it, momentarily mesmerized. Then, the sound of footsteps coming up behind me has me spinning around, ready to fight. But it's not dead co-workers or demons that round the corner. It's Ruggiero, in his suit, holding a stun baton in one hand. His eyes go past me, fixing on the flesh and the hole. He says,
What the hell?
but I don't hear him. I only see his mouth make the words because he's wearing a suit and I'm not.
Do you see that?
I ask, pointing at the hole. It's a stupid question, especially because he can't hear me. But it's clear that he does see it. He steps toward the thing, mesmerized like I was moments ago. Forgetting for a moment everything I've just experienced, forgetting that I have no idea what's real and what's not, I turn and look at the bubbling mist inside the flesh hole. It calls to me, promising that the pain in my head will end if I travel through the hole. But somewhere deep in my feverish mind is a voice of reason that cries out against the whispering. What if this thing tricked me into killing Saldez and Boykin? What if it killed all 97 people around this station? What if... My body goes stiff as electricity powers through my system from Ruggiero's baton. My mouth opens wide, but I can't scream. Unable to control my muscles, I fall to the fleshy floor, landing stiffly on my side. My eyes seem to be the only things still working, and I look up at Ruggiero as he steps over me, his gaze fixed on the hole. Movement besides my head draws my vision just in time to see a slug-like worm with a human eyeball for a head lurch at my mouth. It slithers down my throat on a wave of putrid slime. Ruggiero looks at me as control starts to come back into my body. My tongue wriggles frantically as I try to tell him, to warn him about the slug inside me and the danger this place poses. But before I can, he slams a boot into my face, knocking me out. I awake to a bright light shining in my face and 4 hazmat-suited people rushing with purpose around my gurney. I'm strapped down and completely naked. Panic jolts me violently out of the sleep world as I realize what must have happened. Ruggiero put me in stasis for the trip back. That means he brought it back? I ask.
He brought it back?
No one answers me. They're preparing instruments and talking to each other. One man has a running monologue about the state of the subject and how I'm showing signs of aggression. I fight against the straps, trying to get free. But I stop struggling as the skin of my stomach bulges up, like a pregnant woman's stomach, if she were pregnant with some ungodly creature from another dimension. All activity around me ceases as the 4 people lean in to get a look at what's happening. A pain in my gut hits, immense and breathtaking. The skin over my stomach rips open in 4 places as bulging, blood-drenched tentacles shoot out, crashing through the hazmat suit visors and gripping the surprised faces behind. The once orderly room devolves into chaos and blood and screams, my own included. Death reigns around me,